You're being transferred from the development department to the sales department. Isaiah, the department manager, informed me, and it felt like I had been hit in the head with a hammer. I desperately wanted to stay in the development department. I hated the idea of being in sales. Driven by this strong feeling, I rebelled against Isaiah, who had just delivered the news of my transfer. However, it seemed like the decision was final, and Isaiah showed no signs of taking back what he said. Still holding on to my frustration, I returned to my desk, only to be hit by another shock. The reason for my transfer was that everyone in the department had petitioned for it. Everyone, including the senior staff, was fed up with your arrogant attitude. We don't want to work with you anymore. If you don't quit, we will. Everyone but you said that to Isaiah. Trembling with my lips quivering, I looked around the office. Everyone was staring at me with cold eyes. It was only then that I realized just how terrible my behavior had been. And suddenly, it all made sense. I deserved to be demoted. I quietly accepted the transfer. When I learned my new office was in my hometown, I felt bitter, but I decided to accept it as the punishment I deserved. Determined to work humbly, I found that my past self still haunted me. As I was brought to my knees by regret, the one who reached out a helping hand to me was, "My name is Riley Woodson. I used to work in the development department at a company that deals in power tools. But that was until just recently. Now, I'm in a branch office far from the headquarters, in my hometown. And here I am, under countless cold stares. So, that's Riley, the guy who used to be in development? I've never heard of someone from development being transferred to sales. He must have really messed up. Apparently, he's been boasting to everyone since he joined the company. Saying things like, 'Don't challenge me, I'm a prodigy.' Wow, we have to work with a guy like that now?" Those comments were impossible to ignore. I couldn't help but avert my eyes in shame. Through the window, the scenery outside was exactly what you'd imagine, a typical countryside view. Vast fields of farmland and patches of nature, with only a few modest buildings scattered here and there. Nearby, I could even see the bright colors of daffodils blooming in the distance. The sight only deepened my feeling of despair. I started reflecting on the path that had brought me here. I had been called a prodigy in my hometown. In elementary, middle, and high school, I was always ranked number 1 in my class. "Riley, you're amazing." Not only did my teachers and the adults in the neighborhood praise me, but Hugh, my friend since elementary school, also admired me from a young age. That's why I became so full of myself. "I'm sick of hearing that, Hugh. You need to expand your vocabulary. That's why you always score poorly in language arts." "Haha, you're right. I'll study harder." When I elbowed Hugh, he gave me his usual awkward smile. He was always like that. When it came time to choose where to go to college, I naturally decided to apply to a prestigious university in the city. With my grades and GPA, I was confident I'd get in, and I bragged about it to everyone. After all, no one from our high school had ever gone to that university before. I would be the first. But then, to my surprise, Hugh said he would apply there too. What? There's no way you could get in. But the teacher said that if I work a little harder on my GPA, I might be within reach. There's no point. No matter how much you try, it's useless. Maybe because I rejected him so strongly, Hugh eventually gave up on applying. I went on alone, easily getting into the prestigious university, and after leaving my hometown, I rarely returned. So, I have no idea what happened to him after that. At the famous university, I performed exceptionally well and eventually joined the company I work for now. Most of my co-workers in the development department were from what you'd call party schools. So, I acted arrogantly there too. When a fellow employee submitted a proposal and a senior pointed out some issues with it, I saw him slink back to his desk in defeat. I walked over to him. Without being asked, I grabbed the proposal and started reading it. "Hey, this structure is all wrong. Even a high schooler could figure this out. Did you really graduate from college? Let me fix it for you," I'd say, offering unsolicited help. Naturally, my co-workers, both peers and seniors, were not pleased with my condescending attitude. But at the time, I had no clue. 2 years into the job, When Isaiah called me in, I was convinced it was news of a promotion. You're being transferred from the development department to sales. Isaiah delivered the news, and it felt like I'd been hit over the head with a hammer. What? Why? Why sales of all things? Anyone can do that job. Then you should be able to do it too. No, that's not what I meant. Why should I, of all people, be stuck doing a job that anyone can do? That's exactly the problem. Isaiah pointed a finger at me. Have you ever thought about your last name, Woodson? It's one of the professions that were valued and respected during the frontier days. People often talk about self-reliance and individual success during that time. But many also contributed to building a better community by cooperating with others. Without consideration and cooperation, you lose respect. We can't eat off respect, though. That's not the point. It's about working with humility and respect. You lack that. You look down on everyone else. I frowned at his criticism. Isaiah stood up and placed a hand on my shoulder. Learn the right attitude through your work in sales. Frustrated, I turned away without saying a word. And I stormed back to my desk, slamming it with my fist in anger. My coworkers looked up, startled, and then sighed in exasperation. Riley got demoted. Good, our petition worked. Hearing this, I rushed over to them. It was my peers talking. Hey! What do you mean by that? I was furious, but instead of being intimidated, one of them raised his eyebrows at me. Listen, everyone, including the seniors, was sick of your arrogant attitude. We don't want to work with you anymore. We told Isaiah that if you don't quit, we will. Once again, I was stunned. Trembling, I looked around the office. Everyone was staring at me with cold, indifferent eyes. It was only at that moment that I finally realized how awful I had been. It all made sense now. I deserved this demotion. I quietly accepted the transfer. Learning that my new assignment was in my hometown filled me with bitterness, but I decided to accept it as the punishment I deserved. Hey! Why are you all whispering and talking behind his back? That's rude. A bright voice snapped me out of my daze. When I looked up, a woman with a poised and confident demeanor stood before me. She smiled warmly at me. I'm Courtney Harris. I'm the branch manager here, though it's just a small office with only a sales department, so there's not much to brag about. Her comment made the employees chuckle. The once gloomy atmosphere in the office seemed to clear up in an instant. I've heard all about it, Riley. The fact that you weren't fired but only transferred shows that the company still sees you as valuable. You seem to be reflecting on things now, and if you work hard here, I'm sure you'll be back in the development department. Courtney's bright smile was dazzling. As I stared at her in awe, I felt a firm slap on my back. What are you daydreaming about? Time to get to work. Oh, yes. Blushing, I hurried after Courtney, who was about to teach me the ropes. Following her straight posture, I made a firm vow to work humbly here, never looking down on others again. After my first day at the new job, I went home. Back to my parents' house. I had planned to live alone near the office, but when I told my mom I'd been transferred to a branch near home, she said, in that case, it's faster to commute from here. So, I decided to take her up on the offer. As my mother had said, commuting from home was much more convenient than renting the closest apartment. I'm home. I stepped into the entrance, relieved to see my father's shoes weren't there. My father was an average businessman, working in sales at a small and medium-sized enterprise that made parts for our company. I had always looked down on him. Once, on my way home from school, I saw my father at work. There he was, a grown man, desperately pitching his company's products to a customer. To my younger self, that sight looked pathetic. I thought I'd never want to do a job like that, where you sometimes had to suck up to people. That's why I swore I'd never take a sales job. I had even boasted about it to my father before leaving home. Now here I was, demoted and working in sales. I didn't have the guts to face my father. Since returning home a few days ago, I'd been avoiding him. If he wasn't home, it was lucky for me. I was physically and mentally exhausted from my first day, and I didn't want to have to tiptoe around the house. Welcome home, Riley. Dinner's ready. My mom pulled me along. I tilted my head, wondering why she was being so forceful, and then I saw my father in the living room. I couldn't help but make a sour face. Welcome home. I'm home. Since he greeted me, I returned the courtesy out of politeness. Oh, thank goodness. Finally, you and your father are face to face. I was worried because you've been avoiding him. I figured if I didn't make you see each other, you two might never talk again. Now, let's eat. I made a special dinner for your first day at the new job. The table was packed with my favorite foods: roasted chicken wings, deviled eggs, meatloaf, chicken noodle soup, coleslaw, macaroni and cheese, mashed potatoes. Everything was just as delicious as I remembered. As I wolfed down my food, my mom smiled and asked me how work was going and if I thought I'd be good at sales. My father, on the other hand, didn't say a word. Same as always. It left me with a mix of relief and discomfort. A week passed since my transfer. What I learned was that sales were much harder than I thought. When it came to the products I had worked on in development, I could explain them with ease. But with the other tools, I was completely lost. I felt like punching my past self for saying, anyone can do sales. If you're in sales, you need to be able to explain all of our products. Courtney scolded me, and I spent my breaks staring intently at our product catalog. The atmosphere in the office was still cold towards me. The bad rumors from my time in the development department still lingered. People say let it blow over, but there didn't seem to be any such wind blowing my way. I couldn't help but feel distant. That's why I was behind the branch office, studying the product catalog. It was a perfect spot because I could practice speaking out loud without bothering anyone. It was mid-spring, so the weather was just right, not too hot or too cold. As I muttered to myself, imagining a client in front of me while explaining the products, I heard the sound of a baby crying. A baby? Out here in the middle of nowhere? I tilted my head and looked around. Then I spotted a small cat in front of me. A bright, tawny tabby cat. The crying sound I heard earlier was actually its meow. I realized I misheard. The tabby approached me. Cats are naturally cautious creatures. Even more so if they're strays. So I was surprised, but at the same time, I found it adorable. Truth be told, I'm a huge cat lover. Meow. The tabby let out a soft, affectionate sound, and I was instantly smitten. I wished I had brought some treats for it, now that I knew a cat was around. But all I had on me was the product catalog. Here you go, butterscotch, snack time. Courtney's voice called out. The tabby responded with a meow and trotted off toward her voice. Courtney soon appeared in the direction the cat was heading. Oh. Riley, what are you doing out here? Just practicing for sales. What about you? I'm here to give Butterscotch a snack. Butterscotch? Is that the name of the tabby? Is it your cat? No, it's a stray. It just settled here. I named it. Why Butterscotch? Because I like butterscotch. Courtney crouched down and started feeding Butterscotch some cat treats. Her usual composed expression softened into something much gentler. You like cats too, don't you, Courtney? Of course. How about you, Riley? Yes. I nodded enthusiastically, and she laughed. Oh, and feel free to talk to me more casually. All this formality is too stiff. Okay, but that's an order from your branch manager. Just kidding. She playfully stuck out her tongue, and my heart skipped a beat. Okay, I'll try to be more casual then. Courtney smiled warmly at my response. Sharing the same love for cats and seeing her more relaxed, I felt like the distance between us had shrunk just a bit. The thought made my heart flutter. Suddenly, she handed me some cat treats. Here, Riley. You want to give Butterscotch a snack too, right? As soon as the treats were in my hand, Butterscotch came back over to me. It meowed as if demanding the treat, and I couldn't help but smile at how adorable it was. Hee hee, Riley, you should smile like that more often. It's because you're always wearing that serious, stern expression that people find it hard to talk to you. Really? Is that why? You didn't realize? Courtney widened her eyes in surprise. When I shook my head, she shrugged her shoulders. I'll be more mindful of that. Good. Her smile was as bright as ever. As I stood there, captivated by her, she suddenly clapped her hands, breaking the spell. Break's over. Let's get back to work. Yes. As I stood up, Butterscotch promptly trotted off. The treats in my hand were all gone. Feeling a bit disappointed by Butterscotch's departure and by Courtney switching back to work mode, I mentally shifted myself back to focus. After Courtney's advice, I made an effort to smile more often. Whenever I felt tense, I would think about Courtney and Butterscotch, and my expression would naturally soften. Though sometimes I smiled too much and probably looked a bit too relaxed. But just as she said, people slowly started to talk to me more. As I worked with a smile and a humble attitude, I grew closer to my colleagues, and by the end of the first month, I had made good friends with many of them. I'm sorry about what we said on your first day. We were out of line. Walter and Aiden, the first people I got close to, one day bowed their heads to me. No, those rumors were true, and I totally understand why everyone acted that way. It's fine, really. Hearing this, both of them sighed in relief. As my relationships with my coworkers improved, I realized how much easier it made the job. Because I used to be in development, people would come to me with product-related questions, and I'd ask them for advice on my sales challenges. I began to enjoy working in sales. It's been a few months since I started thinking that. I was called into Courtney's office for a significant task. I have a job I'd like you to take on, Riley. You know about CL Corp, right? Yes, they're a company that sells farming equipment. It is really a major. Exactly. They've approached us about carrying some of our products, and I'd like you to handle the negotiations. Wait, why me? I haven't even been in sales for a year yet, and isn't that something headquarters should take care of? The product they're interested in is one you developed. So who better than you? If this deal goes through, they might even start carrying other products from our company. If that happens, this branch would break the all-time sales record, not just for here, but for the entire company. It's a huge deal. What do you think? Can you do it? The words all-time record took my breath away. A shiver ran through my body. But it wasn't from fear, it was excitement. I'll do it. Please let me handle it. I knew you'd say that. Good luck. A sales rep from AIP, the company that handles most of the parts for the products we're negotiating, will be attending the meeting with you. You have a meeting scheduled with them tomorrow, so be prepared. Courtney's smile only fueled my determination. I was going to make sure this deal happened, no matter what. But AIP, that's the company my father works for. At dinner, I decided to ask my father. Hey, Dad, tomorrow I have a pre-meeting with the rep from AIP who's helping us with the CL Corp deal. Do you know who that person might be? My relationship with my father was still awkward, and he was a quiet man to begin with, so we barely spoke. Asking him this question made me more nervous than meeting a new client. Don't bring work into the house. With that curt reply, my father silently finished his dinner and retreated to his room. Come on, can't you just answer for once? I muttered a complaint under my breath. So the next day, I was fired up and ready for my meeting with the AIP representative, but it was my father who appeared in front of me. I was so shocked that I couldn't even speak. I'm Kyle Woodson. Nice to meet you. My father handed his business card to Courtney and me. Courtney, after seeing his last name, widened her eyes in surprise. Woodson, are you by any chance related to Riley? He's my father. When I told her, Courtney exclaimed, "What?" and her eyes opened even wider. I glared at my father, who sat calmly across from me, wearing a gentle smile. Why didn't you say anything when I asked you yesterday? I was irritated, so my voice came out sharp. My father's expression grew stern. Don't bring family matters into work. What's that supposed to mean? That's not even an answer. Unable to contain my anger, I stood up abruptly. Courtney quickly scolded me. Hey! That's enough. Even if he's your father, it's rude to treat someone we're about to work with that way. Chastised, I reluctantly bowed my head toward my father and muttered, I apologize. My father said nothing in return. I'm truly sorry. Riley is still learning, so I hope you'll guide him along the way. Even as Courtney, too, bowed her head beside me, my father remained silent. In my mind, I cursed, wondering how someone like him had managed to stay in sales for so long. After the meeting ended, I bowed my head to Courtney. I'm sorry about my father. He's not much of a talker. He was like a craftsman, really cool. She said, surprising me with a comment completely opposite of how I saw him. Hearing Courtney call my father cool stirred feelings of jealousy in me. No, this is embarrassing. I shouldn't be jealous of my own father, I thought, shaking my head to push the feeling away. Our meeting with CL Corp is next week. I'll be joining too, of course. Let's work together to secure this contract. Despite the small sense of unease I felt about my father, I could only nod in response to Courtney's cheerful encouragement. Then, the day of the meeting arrived. The weather was perfect, almost as if it were rooting for us. All right, let's do this. Courtney was fired up, while my father, as usual, said nothing. Together, we waited for the representative from CL Corporation. That meeting is supposed to take place at our office. Since the client wanted to test the products firsthand, the agricultural equipment was too large to transport easily. So they were coming to us. The person attending the meeting today was supposedly an American working at CL Corp's US branch. CL Corp had offices all over the world, and they often made deals with companies that produced quality products in each country. Their headquarters promoted a culture of diversity, which was likely why they sent people from various backgrounds. Before long, a taxi pulled up in front of our building. When I saw who stepped out, I froze. Riley? Courtney called my name in a puzzled tone, nudging me with her elbow. But I couldn't move, still staring at the person in front of me. I was more shocked than when I found out my father was coming. Standing there was Hugh. The same childhood friend I had spent my school days with from elementary to high school, whom I had belittled and whose path I had obstructed. My name is Hugh. I'm the representative from CL Corporation. It's a pleasure to meet you. As Hugh extended his business card, I took it with trembling hands. I was too stunned to speak as my father and Courtney, with smiles on their faces, handed their business cards to Hugh. I knew I had to do the same. I'm Riley, I said, handing my card to Hugh. His expression darkened. So, it really is you, Riley. His face and voice made it clear that he still harbored negative feelings toward me. Courtney led Hugh to the meeting room. After some light conversation over tea, we got down to business. Here is the product that CL Corp expressed interest in, Courtney said. We stepped outside. Courtney introduces the product she has prepared to Hugh. Riley here was involved in the development of this product, so feel free to ask him any questions. Is that so? Hugh's short response made me break out in a cold sweat. Feeling the tension, I began explaining how the product worked. I see, it's great that it's intuitive to use without much explanation, Hugh said. Exactly. Courtney replied with a smile. Hugh slowly released his grip on the tool and looked at us with an apologetic expression. It's a great product, but I'm going to have to pass on this contract. What? Why? Courtney's voice was filled with confusion. Hugh stared directly at me. I've known Riley since we were kids. I know exactly the kind of person he is, someone who belittles others and shows no respect. I can't trust a product made by someone like that. So, it's my fault after all. Instead of feeling shocked, I felt a strange sense of acceptance. The mistakes of my past were catching up with me. I had been a terrible person back then. This felt like the punishment I deserved, and I resigned myself to losing the contract. But then, my father stepped in between Hugh and me. Looking Hugh straight in the eyes, he said, "You're right. Riley lacked respect in the past. But he's not the same person anymore. He's changed and is now taking his work seriously. Please, don't judge him by his past. Judge him by the person he is now." My father was engaged with customers with sincere words and a sincere attitude. It was exactly like what I had seen all those years ago when I passed by him on my way home from school. Back then, I thought, I never want to be like that. But now, it felt different. His actions seemed noble. I wanted to be like him, or rather I needed to be like him. But if I kept hiding behind my father, I'd only look weak. I mustered my courage and stood beside him. Hugh, I'm truly sorry for belittling you and interfering with your future. I was full of myself back then. And I know an apology can't undo the damage I caused. But just for today, can you look past me and focus on this company and this product? Yes. I developed it, but it's the amazing team at our manufacturing department and the dedicated employees of AIP who brought it to life. I couldn't have done it alone. I don't want to waste their hard work. So, please reconsider the contract. I couldn't read Hugh's emotions as he refused to meet my eyes. Then, someone stepped beside me. At the same time, I heard footsteps approaching from behind us. We're asking you too. Courtney spoke up, followed by a chorus of pleas from the employees behind us. My chest tightened and I felt tears welling up. I understand. I apologize to all of you. I let my personal feelings get in the way of work. This is an excellent product. Let's move forward with the contract. As Hugh took back his words, the employees erupted in cheers. Courtney rushed over to thank him repeatedly. Finally, Hugh and I locked eyes, and he walked over, giving me a pat on the shoulder. Riley, sorry for being so harsh. It's not you who should apologize. I'm the one who's at fault for everything. Hugh lowered his gaze. The reason I wanted to go to the same university as you, Riley, was because I wanted to study with you. You made fun of me a lot. But I always looked up to you. When you rejected me, it was such a shock that I changed my entire path. I didn't know that. I'm really sorry. This time, I looked him in the eyes as I apologized. Hugh extended his hand to me. When I grabbed it, he pulled me in close. Seeing you today, I realized again how amazing you are, Riley. Do you think we can finally become real friends this time? A warm surge of emotion welled up from deep inside me. I swallowed hard, determined not to cry here. If you're willing to give me another chance, let's start over and be friends. Hugh gripped my hand tightly with both of his. As we stood there, applause erupted around us. The setting sun painted the road home in red as my father and I walked together. Looking at his back as he walked ahead of me, I found myself wondering if he had always been this imposing. I hadn't really taken a good look at him like this before. Thank you, Dad. And I'm sorry. I called out to his broad back, and he stopped, turning to face me. When I was younger, I saw you working so hard, and I thought, I don't want to become a man like that. That's why I told you I'd never do sales and left. But I was wrong. I didn't understand anything back then. You weren't just working for yourself, you were doing it for the company, for others. You were a respectable, cool dad, and I didn't see that. I glanced up at him as I finished speaking. My father didn't say a word, just stared at me quietly. I shrugged, thinking he would stay silent as usual. You've always been smart. He spoke up softly. After widening my eyes, I held my breath, ready to hear what he would say next. But the problem was, you let your intelligence get to your head. I always believed that one day, you'd understand. And now, you've reflected on your past and moved forward. Today, when your co-workers gathered around you as you apologized sincerely, I realized just how much you've grown. You've done well, Riley. Hearing those words, I couldn't hold back my tears anymore. As I sobbed, my father gently pulled me into a hug. You should be proud of yourself. You've grown through your mistakes, and I'm proud to call you my son. Sniffling, I nodded in his arms. The next day at work, I was greeted with smiles from everyone. Riley, those heartfelt words of yours? Man, they really hit me. So now Riley's going to be the top salesperson? No way the CEO's gonna let you stay here. So, does that mean you're heading back to headquarters? At Aiden's comment, Walter and everyone else in the office looked at me with sad expressions. No, don't get ahead of yourselves. Besides, the only reason we secured the deal yesterday was because all of you supported me. Even if headquarters calls me back, I'm going to say I won't go without you all. When I said that, Aiden grinned and tackled me. I stumbled back from the force. All right, sorry to interrupt your moment. Courtney appeared, as composed as ever. I couldn't help but stare at her, captivated by her usual poise, but Aiden nudged me, grinning mischievously. Riley, were you serious earlier? About not going back to headquarters without everyone? Yes. I'm really happy to be working with all of you, and I want to keep working together for as long as I can. Courtney hummed thoughtfully, crossing her arms. Even with a slightly troubled expression, she still looked elegant. All right, I see what needs to be done. She mumbled something I didn't quite understand and then signaled by clapping her hands for attention. Everyone, I have something I need to tell you. The truth is, I'm Mr. Harrison's daughter. The confession was so sudden that the room fell silent for a moment. When we finally processed what she had said, everyone, including me, let out a collective, "What?" I was just as shocked as the others. The reason I was the branch manager here was for training. My last name was a fake too. When I told my father I wanted to be the CEO one day, he said, "Then go and boost the performance at this branch." Courtney glanced around at all the employees. Thanks to Riley's success, I've achieved results that satisfied my father. He told me I could return to headquarters. I was thinking of bringing Riley back with me, but her eyes met mine, and my heart raced. I've been thinking about something else. Like Riley, after working here, I realized I don't want to leave everyone behind. So after hearing Riley's thoughts, I've decided. I'm going to turn this branch into a subsidiary. The employees let out another collective gasp of surprise. Yesterday, I told Hugh about my plan to make this branch a subsidiary, and we've arranged for the contract to be signed with my new company. You'll get in trouble with Mr. Harrison for doing that without permission. Walter, clearly shocked, blurted out. Courtney stuck out her tongue playfully. I'm going to explain it to my father, Mr. Harrison, soon. Riley, will you come with me? Me? Yes, please. With Courtney giving me that pleading look, there was no way I could refuse. The next day, Courtney and I arrived at headquarters. It hadn't even been a year since I left, but it felt strangely nostalgic. The work at the branch had left a strong impression on me. Courtney headed to the CEO's office, leaving me to do as I pleased. I wasn't sure what to do, so I decided to visit the development department. As awkward as it was, and as much as I feared their reactions, I wanted to apologize to them properly. I went back to the entrance and told the receptionist that I didn't have an appointment but wanted to see someone from the development team. She contacted Isaiah, and I was granted permission to visit. With sweaty palms, I made my way to the development department. Excuse me. I'm sorry to interrupt your work. I nervously stepped into the room, where everyone was present. The office was filled with tense silence, and I couldn't help but shiver. I told myself it was from excitement, not fear, as I stood before them. I took a few big breaths, and then spun the words as if I were shouting. I caused all of you a lot of trouble when I was here. I was selfish, and I created a bad atmosphere. I'm truly sorry. The silence felt deafening. My heart pounded loudly in my chest. Then, the silence was broken by the sound of clapping. I looked up to see Isaiah applauding. I've heard about your success at the branch. I heard you secured a big contract. Well done. No, it wasn't just me. It was thanks to everyone at the branch. Hearing that, Isaiah smiled. You understood the last thing I told you, didn't you? As someone who once worked above you, it makes me proud to see how much you've grown. Then, my former colleagues, both peers and seniors, gathered around me. Riley, you've become such a great guy. I didn't like the old you, but the new you? You're awesome. Congrats on sealing the deal. Keep selling our products, alright? We're counting on you. Hearing these words, tears welled up in my eyes. Yes, I'll keep working hard as a salesperson to make sure all the products you pour your heart and soul into reach as many people as possible. The warm, friendly atmosphere made me smile naturally. Courtney's plan to turn our branch into a subsidiary was officially approved by Mr. Harrison. Even though we became a subsidiary, our work remained the same. We continue to work diligently, selling the products created by our parent company. And today, just like every day, we approach our work with sincerity. I'm the contact person with CL Company. And I'm working hard every day in sales to see if CL Companies Hugh will purchase the fruits of our company's efforts, which were conceived by our development department and completed by our manufacturing department, with parts made by subcontractors like the one my father works for. Hugh, the person I present the products to, usually buys most of them. Apparently, they sell really well. Thanks to that, our company's performance has improved, and both the parent company and our subsidiary are doing well. After a meeting with Hugh, I stopped by a nearby pet store to pick up some treats for Butterscotch, then returned to the office. Butterscotch, I've got treats for you. I offered the treat to Butterscotch, who was basking in the sunlight near the entrance. He happily trotted over. The bell on his collar jingled softly. When our branch became a subsidiary, Butterscotch was officially named the company mascot. These moments, when I feed Butterscotch after returning from work, are a real comfort to me. As Butterscotch licked up the treat, melting my heart, I felt a tap on my shoulder. Hey, top performer. You've got quite the contented look on your face. Courtney grinned, flashing her teeth. Her smile was as dazzling as ever, making me squint. It's all thanks to you, Courtney. I really appreciate it. Well, look at you, being all humble. I like it. Courtney crouched down beside me and gently patted Butterscotch's head. Butterscotch purred contentedly. Speaking of Butterscotch, you've been taking care of him on the weekends when the office is closed, right? Yeah. I just don't feel right leaving him alone. Actually, I just bought a house nearby. What? My shout startled Butterscotch, and his fur stood on end. I quickly apologized and stroked his neck. There was a house near the office that was being sold at a really low price, so I went for it. Courtney, you're always so bold. Like when you made this branch a subsidiary. I teased her, and she laughed, a little embarrassed. I hadn't meant it as a compliment, but her smile was so cute I couldn't help but forgive her. That's why, from now on, I'm planning to take Butterscotch home with me. I always felt bad for having you take care of him at your place. Especially since your dad isn't fond of cats. She was right. Ever since I started bringing Butterscotch home, I found out my father wasn't much of a cat person. But he never said anything about me looking after Butterscotch, remaining his usual silent self. So, I was grateful for Courtney's offer to take Butterscotch. But at the same time, I couldn't help feeling a little disappointed. Courtney must have noticed. As she chuckled softly. Besides, I'm new to owning a cat, so I'll need you to teach me. Why don't you come over and check out the new place? Sure, I'll bring Butterscotch with me. Courtney furrowed her brow, looking thoughtful. Actually, I was hoping the first time you come over, it could just be you, is that okay? Blushing, she glanced up at me with her eyes, and I couldn't refuse. The truth is, I've fallen for her. From the way she's acting, it seems like she feels the same way. When I visit her house, I'll confess my feelings to her. I made up my mind. The old me looked down on others and belittled them. Even after reflecting on my actions, my past self continued to hold me back. But my father, Courtney, and the new friends I made helped me move forward. With gratitude for their support, I resolved to always move forward with humility and respect, no matter what lies ahead. What's wrong? Are you okay? When I asked, she said she hadn't eaten in days. The woman was wearing dirty clothes, and her hair was a mess. Her messy hair covered most of her face. She looked like something out of a horror movie, like a cursed ghost. On top of that, she hadn't bathed, and her body odor was strong. Oh, she's homeless. I guess that makes sense. But I didn't know women could be homeless too. As I was about to walk past her, my father's words echoed in my head, "Don't ignore people in need." I stopped and reached out my hand to the woman, without knowing that this action could lead me to become unemployed. People are precious. Always help one another and cherish the bonds you make. Even if someone betrays you, never betray others yourself. And don't walk past someone in need. That was my father's teaching. As a child, I often got into fights. I grew up in a housing complex and would often run around the empty lots with kids my age. Back then, boys mostly played baseball and would often fight with kids from other neighborhoods over who got to use the empty lot. In those days, parents didn't intervene in kids' fights, so kids would just end on their own. However, whenever my father found out I'd been in a fight, he would say those words to me during dinner. As a kid, I didn't really care about what he said. When I was in upper elementary school, my father passed away from an illness. Ever since then, whenever I pray at his altar, those words of his come flooding back to me. I've carried my father's words as a keepsake and a guide for how to live my life. In high school, my grades weren't bad, but since I grew up in a single-parent household and money was tight, I went straight to work after graduation. Because of my good grades, I was hired by a big company, which was rare for someone with only a high school diploma. My mother was so happy that I, with just a high school education, had gotten into such a big company. Though she had been weak after my job offer, she seemed to regain her strength. At my job, everyone else had graduated from prestigious national universities or top private schools. I felt out of place as a high school graduate, but everyone recognized my passion and effort, so they respected the hard work I put in. As I continued working hard, I was given the opportunity to join a project, and that project turned out to be a success. Kenneth, the senior leader of the project, praised me for my contribution. He acknowledged my analytical skills, my attention to detail, my organization of documents, and the precision of my work. He said, "The project succeeded thanks to you. You really helped us. Thank you," and expressed his gratitude. Looking back, I think Kenneth's words were meant to motivate me even more. After that, I was called in by my manager, Tyler, who told me that another project was in the works. One that could be worth $30 million if successful. I was appointed as a member of this new project. Being selected to join such a major project alongside my college-educated seniors was incredibly encouraging. And I was thrilled from the bottom of my heart. I studied every day, determined to succeed in the project and catch up to the others. Even though the company was filled with highly educated people, the harder I worked, the more results I achieved, and the more I was recognized. People are precious. Always help one another and cherish the bonds you make. Holding on to my father's words, I was deeply satisfied with the environment where I was making more and more connections through my work. In my personal life, I wasn't seeing anyone, and since joining the company, I had been entirely focused on work. Then one day, Tyler announced that a new person would be joining the company. Apparently, the newcomer was a relative of the president, Mr. Harrison, and his name was Kevin. He was also a graduate of Tokyo University, known to be exceptionally sharp. He was much older than me and was joining the company as a mid-career hire, so I braced myself to stay competitive. Little did I know that Kevin's arrival would dramatically change my life. When Kevin joined, I taught him the ropes as if he were a new employee. Since he was much older than me, it honestly felt awkward. But I figured it would be better to teach him thoroughly to help him learn quickly, so I walked him through every detail. However, he didn't appreciate being treated like a newbie, often frowning as if to say, "I don't need you to tell me that." For several months, I endured his attitude while teaching him the job. About 6 months later, Kevin was promoted to section chief. As expected of a relative of Mr. Harrison, he rose through the ranks quickly. Within a year, I found myself working under him, our roles reversed. Wow, already a section chief, and he barely knows his job? I overheard senior employees making remarks like that. Even though his co-workers were trying to teach him, Kevin was slow to pick things up. Is he really a graduate of Tokyo University? Some people even started to question that. This company may be large, but it's family run. Several of the board members are relatives of Mr. Harrison. Naturally, Kevin would likely become one of them in the future. While the senior staff were frustrated with his inability to grasp the work, they knew that if word of this reached the board, it would be the end of their careers. So they reluctantly treated Kevin with respect, not wanting to jeopardize their standing in the company. As Kevin's rank increased, he started delegating his own mundane tasks to his subordinates. "I'm too busy as a manager to handle these trivial tasks. Kyle, input this data for me, will you?" Lately, he's been dumping all of his work on me. Since he never deals with the details himself, when other employees ask him for advice, he tells them to check with someone else. Truthfully, he just doesn't know the answers. The senior staff have no intention of picking up Kevin's slack, so they subtly pass all the work down to me, his direct subordinate. They skillfully avoid getting involved. In this respect, they're quite clever. Unlike them, I'm not calculating enough to dodge these tasks, so I naively accept them, causing my workload to increase even more. However, despite taking on all of these extra tasks, I still had to finish my main responsibilities within regular working hours. When complaints came in, I inevitably ended up taking the blame. Kevin never took responsibility. He always shifted it onto the person who had done the work. This forced me to improve the accuracy of my own work even more. As I spent my days buried in work, I found that my skill level had unknowingly risen. And I gained a reputation within the company for being able to handle tasks quickly and precisely. But this project was a massive $30 million initiative, and incompetence wasn't an excuse. I tried to carve out time to help Kevin catch up with the rest of the team, but he would just say, "Look, you're a high school graduate, so you handle it. You're fast at this stuff anyway." I would reply, "Kevin, if you don't get involved in the work yourself, you won't be able to make accurate decisions when something goes wrong. If you start now, you'll be able to keep pace with the senior staff as the project progresses." Even though I offered this advice out of kindness, he always found an excuse not to do it. Instead, whenever there was a client meeting or social event, he was quick to join the senior staff. "Kyle, can you check this document? I've got a client dinner, so I'm counting on you." With a big smile, he'd quickly get ready and leave the office with the others. As Kevin walked out, the other team members would watch him with skeptical expressions. As the project progressed, even employees who hadn't interacted with Kevin before started asking, "Kyle, is Kevin really fit to be on this project? He doesn't seem to understand anything." More and more people began doubting his credentials. According to someone from another department who had joined the project, Kevin had been hired because of his family ties with Mr. Harrison. And there wasn't even a resume on file for him. With the senior staff being so capable, Kevin's incompetence made him stick out like a sore thumb in the team. Normally, someone like him would have been removed from the project, but because he was a relative of Mr. Harrison, no one dared to suggest it to Tyler. Kevin wasn't actually assigned much work on this project. In reality, he was just a figurehead boss. Even so, the team couldn't stand Kevin just sitting around acting all high and mighty. The senior staff tried to assign him tasks, but even when they did, Kevin couldn't handle them, and they eventually ended up back with me. Because of this, the team started seriously doubting his Tokyo University credentials. One day, Jacob, a senior colleague and also a Tokyo University graduate, struck up a conversation with him. "Kevin, I heard you graduated from Tokyo University. It's nice to talk to a fellow alumnus after so long. I heard you passed on your first try. Impressive. Jacob spoke to Kevin in a nostalgic tone. At first, Kevin responded with a grin, but as Jacob began asking about which department he belonged to and which professors he studied under, Kevin's responses became increasingly vague. Eventually, he admitted, actually, the whole Tokyo University graduate thing. It's something Tyler started saying on his own. I never said that. Those of us listening nearby weren't surprised. We had all suspected as much and were simply disappointed to have our suspicions confirmed. Is this a case of resume fraud? We heard a few mutters, but since it was Tyler who had introduced him as a Tokyo University grad, Kevin had never directly made the claim himself. Still, we had a project to complete, so we focused on the work, paying little attention to Kevin. On the day of the client meeting, I woke up earlier than usual to go over the materials one last time. Kevin was scheduled to present the documents we had prepared to the client, and I wanted to make sure everything was in order. After buying a sandwich from a nearby convenience store, I was walking through a small park to take a shortcut when I saw a woman collapsed on the ground. I stuffed the sandwich in my mouth and ran over to her. She was curled up, clutching her stomach, lying in a fetal position. What's wrong? Are you okay? When I asked, she said she hadn't eaten in days. She was a frail woman, dressed in filthy clothes, her hair a tangled mess. Her long hair was draped down her back, covering most of her face. She looked like something straight out of a horror movie, like a cursed ghost. On top of that, it was clear she hadn't bathed in a while, and her body odor was strong. Oh, she's homeless. I guess that makes sense, but I didn't know women could be homeless too. I was about to leave her there, thinking there wasn't much I could do, but then my father's words flashed in my mind. Don't walk past someone in need. I stopped and reached for my wallet, intending to give her some money, so she could buy something to eat. But as I looked at her more closely, I realized something was wrong. Her breathing was labored, and through the gaps in her messy hair, I could see sweat on her pale face. She looked like she was in serious pain. I decided she wasn't just hungry, and she was unwell, so I called an ambulance. While waiting for the ambulance, she continued to struggle. I couldn't just leave her lying on the ground, so I gently picked her up, despite the strong odor and her dirty appearance, and laid her on a nearby bench. After a while, the ambulance arrived with sirens blaring, and the paramedics rushed over. I explained the situation to them, and they took her to the hospital. As they lifted her onto the stretcher, I felt sorry for her. I took all the cash I had in my wallet and gave it to her, telling her to use it for her treatment. This is too much. I can't accept it. Before she could finish, I handed her over to the paramedics and left the park. As I walked away, I heard her calling out, "Wait, please," but I didn't look back. I was too worried about being late for the client meeting. I checked my watch as I walked and realized I was already running late. Damn, I'm going to be late. I started sprinting as fast as I could. Out of breath, I arrived at the client's office, gave the receptionist my name, and explained the reason for my visit. I was directed to the conference room on the 12th floor, and I hurried to the elevator. The building was 30 stories high, and the elevator moved incredibly fast. But the ride to the 12th floor felt like an eternity, something I'd never experienced before. When I finally reached the meeting room and knocked on the door, I walked in to find the clients and my team already seated, all eyes turning toward me. I apologized for being late, and when they asked why, I explained what had happened in the park. My team believed me, but Kevin didn't. Kyle, What the hell were you doing making the clients wait? This is why a high school grad is useless. Even though I bowed my head in apology, Kevin's tirade didn't stop. You can't even be on time, no wonder you can't get a girlfriend. You'll be single forever with that attitude. And seriously, that ugly tie? At least try to look decent. He kept insulting me, bringing up things that had nothing to do with work. Finally, he sneered, helping a homeless person? At least come up with a better lie. There aren't homeless women just lying around everywhere. As Kevin continued to berate me, I kept bowing and apologizing to the client. By the time I arrived, the presentation materials had already been distributed to everyone, and Kevin was about to give the presentation. Since Kevin couldn't handle preparing the documents, his only role as a manager was to present them. As I flipped through the materials, something felt off. Wait. This isn't right, something's off. As I was looking through the documents, I started to panic, and soon the client spoke up, noticing the discrepancy. Kevin, it seems that the presentation you're giving doesn't match the materials we have in front of us. Kevin, realizing this, quickly glanced at the documents. They were indeed different from what he was presenting. Upon closer inspection, the only sections that were wrong were the ones I had been responsible for. We deeply apologize for the oversight in distributing incomplete materials, Kevin said, bowing to the client. He then requested a chance to redo the presentation at a later time, but the client responded, "We'll need to think about it. For today, you can go." Making such a fundamental mistake at the beginning of a $30 million project was unthinkable. Our team left the client's office and headed back to headquarters. "Kyle, you're fired. I never want to see your face again. A high school grad like you never should have been part of a major project like this. How are you going to take responsibility for a $30 million deal?" I had carefully scheduled everything and checked my work meticulously, so I had full confidence in the materials. I had even reviewed the documents just the day before, so there was no way I could have made such a simple mistake. None of my colleagues said a word to me. It made sense because they had all sacrificed their time and energy, working late into the night for this project. I bowed deeply and apologized to the team. But everyone silently walked ahead, heading back to the office. Even if I hadn't been late that day, the documents had already been distributed, so it wouldn't have been possible to change them on the spot. Back at the office, Kevin relayed the details of the meeting to Tyler. Later, Tyler called me into his office and told me to take some time off. So I sincerely apologized and left the office. At home, while soaking in the bath, the thought of getting fired kept running through my head. I worked so hard to get into this company, but I'm probably getting fired. After my bath, I sat in front of my computer, browsing job sites, but all the listings required a college degree. There wasn't a single position where I could apply my current skills with just a high school diploma. It's impossible. Disheartened, I went to bed. A few days into my leave, my mother came to visit. I had vented to her over the phone about what had happened, and she was worried. "I made your favorite dish. Eat up and cheer up. No matter what happens, I'll always be on your side." She encouraged me before heading back home. I didn't want to make her worry or burden her any more than I already had. Feeling stuck in my room wasn't doing me any good, so I decided to go out for a change of pace the next day. The following morning, I left home, but oddly enough, I left at the same time I usually do for work. My body remembers, I thought with a wry smile as I stepped outside. The weekday mornings are so quiet. Walking the familiar route, I noticed how different the neighborhood felt during the quiet of a weekday morning. My feet naturally led me to the small park I often cut through on my way to work. I thought I'd take a break there, but as I approached the bench, I saw a woman already sitting there, as if she were waiting for someone. The park only had one bench. Oh, someone's already sitting there. I decided to keep walking, giving up on sitting down, but just as I was passing by, the woman suddenly stood up and looked directly at me. I glanced at her and felt my breath catch in my throat. She was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, with features so striking they seemed almost otherworldly. To my surprise, she walked toward me and spoke. "Thank you so much for helping me the other day. I've been waiting here because I really wanted to thank you in person." She bowed deeply in front of me. Did I help you with something? I couldn't recall ever helping someone this beautiful. Maybe she's confusing me with someone else? I thought, staying silent for a moment. Then she explained, it was me who had called the ambulance when she had collapsed the other day. "Ah, you're the homeless woman from that day." It finally dawned on me. The woman introduced herself as Madeline. In a flustered moment, I awkwardly smiled and introduced myself as Kyle. Have you lost some weight?" she asked. I replied vaguely, "Well, a lot has happened." Trying to brush it off, but then I suddenly felt the urge to tell her everything. After all, none of this was her fault. I knew that the mix-up with the documents was my responsibility, and I should have double-checked them. But for some reason, I felt an overwhelming need to vent my frustrations to her. I explained the events of that day, the incident with the documents, and why I ended up in my current situation. After listening to my story, Madeline looked down and said in a sorrowful voice, "I'm so sorry, it's my fault." Seeing the sadness in her expression, I was jolted back to reality. Why did I tell her all of this? I thought, feeling a wave of self-loathing for burdening her with my troubles. No, it's not your fault. This was entirely my mistake, so please don't worry about it. I desperately tried to reassure her, but she kept her head down. Just as I was regretting my words, she slowly lifted her head, and for a brief moment, our eyes met. Her beautiful, clear eyes made my heart race. "But, it's strange for your section chief, Kevin, to reprimand you like that in front of the client. From what you've told me, I can't help but think Kevin is suspicious. It doesn't make sense that the documents you worked so hard to prepare were suddenly swapped out." After listening to me, she said that Kevin seemed suspicious. But I had no proof that he was involved. I don't believe I could have mistakenly switched the documents myself, but I don't have any evidence that Kevin did it either. There's nothing I can do, but thank you for caring. Her expression grew more intense. It's obvious that Kevin did it. He probably couldn't stand being told what to do by someone with less education. People like him exist, especially among the sons of wealthy families, she said with conviction. Sons of wealthy families. Of course. She must be from a prestigious family. She's out of my league, I thought. I'll help you, Kyle. Let's overcome this together. Saying that, she took my hand, which I was just staring at in confusion, and squeezed it tightly. If I had a mirror, I was sure my face would have been bright red. The next day, I received a sudden call from the company, asking me to come in immediately. Rushing to the office, I was told to go to the president's office. I knocked on the door and entered. Inside, I saw Kevin, pale-faced, Mr. Harrison, looking stern, and our client from the recent meeting. And standing beside the client was none other than Madeline. Mr. Harrison approached me and started speaking. I've heard everything from Tyler, as well as from your colleagues. I understand the situation now. You're not at fault. Everything was Kevin's doing. I looked around at everyone's faces, realizing the truth. So it was Kevin. He swapped the documents. Mr. Harrison explained what had happened. Kevin, who had joined the company through family connections, had been infuriated that a high school graduate had been assigned as his mentor. He couldn't tolerate the idea of someone with less education giving him orders. When he saw that I, a high school graduate, was participating in a $30 million project, he couldn't stand it. He concocted a plan to sabotage me, swapping out only the documents I had prepared in order to derail the project and have me sent off to a remote branch. He had even offered money to his colleagues to help him create alternate documents, but they had all refused him in a professional manner. Left with no one to help him, Kevin had created and distributed the false documents himself. This information came to light when some of his colleagues reported the incident to Tyler. However, Tyler hesitated to report it to Mr. Harrison, especially since he had no solid evidence. Kevin barely understood our company's system because he had delegated most of his work on the system to his subordinates. The fact that he hadn't properly deleted the documents became crucial evidence when the data for the fake reports was found intact after restoring Kevin's folder. After Mr. Harrison finished explaining, Madeline began to speak. Upon hearing my story the previous day, she had realized that the deal in question was between her father's company and ours. When she got home, she pleaded with her father to give me another chance, explaining how I had helped her. Her father, sensing something was off, had requested that Mr. Harrison investigate the situation, leading to the discovery of Kevin's deceit. Wait, she's the daughter of Mr. Hudson, the president of the client company. As I listened, I couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the situation. When the conversation ended and I stepped outside the room, Madeline followed behind me. She then told me the full story. Her father had been strongly urging her into an arranged marriage with a man she didn't know. Not wanting to marry someone she had no feelings for, she rebelled and ran away from home. With no money and wandering aimlessly for days, she survived by drinking water from a park fountain to stave off her hunger. Eventually, she reached her limit and collapsed in the park where I found her. When she was taken to the hospital, the doctors diagnosed her with severe gastritis and stomach ulcers caused by stress and malnutrition. She used the money I gave her to pay her medical bills, but as soon as she left the hospital, she was found by someone her parents had hired to search for her and was brought back home. Now, she told me, she was feeling much better and could even enjoy her favorite barbecue again. Madeline had been waiting in the park every day during my usual commute time because she wanted to thank me in person. While we were talking, Mr. Hudson approached me from behind. I just wanted my daughter to be happy, but I made decisions selfishly without considering her feelings. I'm ashamed of myself. Thank you for saving her. I would love to work directly with you, he said, offering me a handshake. I hesitated for a moment but then shook his hand. After that, Madeline and I started going out for meals, and eventually, we began dating. One day, during lunch at a cafe, I couldn't help but ask her something that had been on my mind. Why did you offer to help me that day? You could have just thanked me and left it at that. She looked at me seriously and began to explain. That day, when I heard your story, I realized the business deal was with my father's company. I also felt responsible for what had happened. I was certain the mistake wasn't your fault after listening to you, so I wanted my father to investigate and find the truth. And more than anything, I wanted to help you because you were so kind. You helped me, a stranger, by carrying me to the bench and even paying for my hospital bills. As she said this, she shyly looked down, her face softening. I couldn't help but feel a deep affection for her and found myself staring at her with admiration. Thanks to Mr. Hudson's strong recommendation, I was appointed as the lead on the project, and I began working to move it forward. When people at the office found out I was dating the client's daughter, some were envious, commenting on how lucky I was to be with someone so beautiful, but they all laughed and congratulated me, saying it made sense given the circumstances. I would be lying if I said I didn't hold a grudge against Kevin for what he did. But remembering my father's words, even if someone betrays you, never betray others, helped me let go of that resentment. Kevin was eventually demoted and sent to a remote branch, where he was retrained alongside new hires as a regular employee. His salary and bonuses were reduced to the same level as the newcomers, and he was abandoned by his family and his fiancée, leaving him to live a lonely life. Now, I'm driving with my mother to visit my father's grave on the anniversary of his death. I want to tell him about my engagement to Madeline. As my mother quietly gazes out the window, she suddenly speaks. I never imagined that incident would lead to all of this. Life is full of surprises. I'm sure your father is smiling down on us now. She murmurs softly, looking up at the sky through the window. Gripping the steering wheel tightly, I quietly whisper to myself, Dad, you don't have to worry anymore. I know I made Mom worry, leaving her feeling alone all this time, but now I understand. I've found someone I love, and I'll protect her and Mom from now on. Rest easy, Dad. I whispered these words in my heart as I gazed at the beautiful blue sky beyond the windshield. So you graduated from college and got a job, but quit after just 6 months? The interviewer smirked as he said this. Kids these days, they quit their jobs so easily. They don't like the work, they don't like their boss, the job's too tough, or the pay's too low. Back in my day, people who complained like that wouldn't even get hired. I think kids today are really spoiled. I went home and prayed in front of my mom and dad's altar. Today's interview didn't go well either. But don't worry. I'll definitely land a good job soon, I promise. I checked job listings on my phone. This place. I can't believe they're hiring. Well, it can't hurt to try. And then, the day of the interview, I put on my dad's suit and wore the watch he left me. That watch. I had a feeling it might be. Excuse me? My name is Sean. I'm 22 years old. I'm desperately searching for a job right now. After graduating college, I joined a company. But I didn't stay there long. The company was fairly big, but the overtime was brutal, and I was always busy. But that's not why I quit. Even though it was tough, the job was rewarding. However, I couldn't get along with my boss, and it became unbearable to go to work. He was notorious in the company for being a new grad crusher, and one by one, my fellow new hires started quitting. I did my best to stick it out, but after 6 months, I'd reached my limit. I complained to the management team several times, but since he'd been with the company for years, they said they couldn't remove him. Nothing changed. So I left the company. Now, I'm fighting to find a new job. But no company wants to hire someone who quit after just 6 months. I keep getting asked the same thing in interviews. Why did you quit after 6 months? There's no way I can say I was harassed by my boss. Bad-mouthing your previous employer during an interview is a huge no-no. So I usually gave vague answers like we weren't a good fit or I wanted to improve my skills. But no one was convinced by those answers. I'm just someone who quit after 6 months, a person with no perseverance. The only thing people will think of me is that I'm just like that. I've had 4 interviews so far, but none have led to a job offer. If this keeps up, I'm in serious trouble. I don't have any family to lean on. My mother passed away from illness when I was young, and my father died last year, also from illness. So, I don't have a home to go back to. The old house I grew up in was just a cheap apartment, and now, someone else probably lives there. I have nowhere to go back to. There's no one I can rely on either. That's why I need to find a new job as soon as possible. With that in mind, I worked a part-time job every day while searching for new openings. One day, a job listing caught my eye. It was from the big company I had admired for years. This company, they're actually hiring? This company rarely posted job openings. Back when I was in college, I checked constantly to see if they had any listings. I even asked my professors and friends to keep an eye out, but unfortunately, they never had any positions open. And now, there it was, a job opening from the very company I had dreamed of. Only 3 applicants would be accepted. Should I apply, even though it's probably a long shot? No. I'll just fail again. A company this big wouldn't want someone like me. Who quit after 6 months? I chuckled bitterly to myself, closed the job posting, and went to sleep. But all I could think about was that job at the big company. I knew there was no way I'd get in. But it was the company I had always dreamed of. Maybe I should just take a chance, even if it's a long shot. That thought kept swirling around in my head. No, I need to focus on what's right in front of me. I have an interview with XYZ company today. I need to do my best to get an offer. I was at another company's interview. Wearing the same suit I had used during job hunting in college, I nervously walked into the building. I followed the receptionist and stepped into the meeting room. Let's get started right away. Please state your name and your highest level of education. Yes. My name is Sean, and I graduated from XYZ College. Like usual, I introduced myself, listed my education, and gave my self-introduction. So you graduated from XYZ College and joined ABC Corporation, but you quit after 6 months? The interviewer smirked as he said this. But I was used to this reaction by now. It was exactly what I expected. I briefly explained the reason I quit and highlighted my strengths. That's why I believe I can leverage my strengths in a sales position. I'm also good at calculations, so... Yes, that's enough. Excuse me? Kids these days quit their jobs so quickly. We want someone who will stay with the company for the long term. But young people today leave after just a short time. They don't like the work, don't like their boss, think the job's too hard, or the pay's too low. Back in my day, people who said things like that wouldn't even get hired. We worked for the company, and unpaid overtime was normal. Kids today are really lucky, but even so, new grads keep quitting. The interviewer started talking about his own struggles. It wasn't the first time I had encountered someone like this at an interview. My generation had it tough. Things are so much better now. While indirectly implying, you're going to quit right away too, aren't you? Sure, quitting my last job was my responsibility. But I wished they could see beyond that one aspect. No matter how much I talked about my strengths or presented myself positively, every interviewer would inevitably sigh when they heard the reason I left my last job. Even though I knew this was how it would go, it was still disheartening. And you might want to pay a bit more attention to your appearance. Does something seem off? It's not bad, but how do I put it? You've got a fresh look, but there's something lacking in modesty. I see. I don't remember much of what was asked during the rest of the interview. But I do remember feeling incredibly frustrated and sad. I returned home and prayed at my mom and dad's altar. Today's interview didn't go well either. But don't worry, I'll be fine. I'll definitely land a great job. As usual, I looked for job listings on my phone. There were many job postings online, with tons of companies hiring. And the one that caught my eye was the same big company I had seen the other day. If I could work at such a large company, the sense of fulfillment would be incredible. There's a reason I've always admired this company. It's because my dad used to praise it all the time. This company is amazing. It started out small, but it grew so fast. You hear its name everywhere now, right? I worked there once, and it was such a great place. The employees were happy and relaxed. Dad, you've told me that story at least 10 times already. If it was so great, why'd you leave? The company's huge, and the pay was good, right? Yeah, well, I guess I found something even more important than the company. What are you talking about? I don't get it. But yeah, it does seem like a great company, with good benefits and all. Oh, really? Then you should apply. If you get in, I'd be so proud of you. Come on, don't be ridiculous. I'll get rejected in the paperwork stage. But yeah, working there would be pretty nice. Working where you want is the most important thing. If you ever need anything, just tell me. I'll always be on your side. That's kind of creepy, Dad. Creepy? How's that creepy? If you say things like that, here comes Dad's hug attack. Whoa! Stop it, that's gross. Ha ha ha. Thinking back to those days, I realized how happy I was back then. After it was just the two of us, there were tough times, but I never felt lonely. Dad was always joking around like that, keeping the house filled with laughter. But now, Dad's gone. I have to do this on my own. Looking at the altar, I felt like Dad and Mom were smiling at me gently. Maybe I'll go grab some ice cream from the convenience store. I walked to the nearby store, bought some ice cream, and headed back home. As I looked up at the sky, I saw a shooting star streak across. Whoa! A shooting star. Maybe something good's coming my way. Quietly, I glanced down at my phone. Before I knew it, I had applied to the dream company. An email arrived saying, "We'll send the results of your application within 3 business days." It's a long shot, but why not? 3 days later, I got the results of the application. Nervously, I opened the email. It said, "We'd like to invite you to the next stage of the process." How does the following date work for an interview? What? No way. I actually made it to the interview. I quickly replied to the email. The interview date was set. The night before, I was ironing my dress shirt. I remembered the last time someone criticized my suit. At the previous interview, they asked if I had a better suit. Not like I have a lot of suits. I slowly opened my closet and started checking my clothes one by one. Suits are expensive. I couldn't afford to have many. Then, one suit caught my eye. It was the suit my dad used to wear. "Why don't you wear this suit? You and I are about the same size, so it should fit. But this is pretty old, isn't it? Aren't you supposed to wear your own suit for job interviews? Who cares? It'll be like I'm wrapping you up and protecting you, right?" Ha ha ha. Stop it, Dad. After hearing that, I don't want to wear that suit anymore. I'll just buy a new one for myself. Oh, really? That conversation felt like it happened just yesterday. But my hand naturally reached for that suit. Dad said it would be like he's wrapping me up and protecting me, right? Oh. And there's that watch too. It's a bit old-fashioned, but I might as well wear it. I pulled out the watch that I had carefully kept. This suit and watch were keepsakes from my dad. I never imagined there would come a day when I'd wear this suit to a job interview. I hung the suit on the hanger, placed the watch on my desk, and went to bed. And the next day, I slipped on my dad's suit, strapped on his watch, and left the house. My heart was pounding, but I kept rehearsing the interview in my head. I practiced over and over to be ready for any question that came my way. When I arrived at the interview venue, there were about 10 other people there. Everyone looked more experienced than me, and I felt a bit intimidated. Most of them seemed older, more confident, and I couldn't help but feel like I didn't stand a chance. They've probably all had long careers and come here well prepared. Just then, a man walked up to me. "Hey, how old are you?" "Huh? Me? I'm 22. I'm 25. Did you start working right after high school or something?" "No, I graduated from college and then quit the company I joined pretty quickly." The guy who started talking to me was also waiting for his interview. He smiled warmly and kept chatting with me. "Oh, I see. So you left pretty soon after starting, huh?" "Yeah, that's pretty much how it went." "Ah, don't worry. I'm not blaming you or anything. Something bad must have happened, right?" "Well, actually, my boss was pretty terrible. Everyone I started with ended up quitting too. I know it's my fault for leaving after just 6 months. But because of that, I'm having trouble finding another job." "Yeah, I get it. You can't really say, 'My boss was the problem' in an interview, right? It's tough to figure out what to say. It really helps to hear that. I don't get to talk about this stuff with many people." I see. "Well, think of me as your big brother, and feel free to talk about anything." With a slightly playful expression, that person said it. The tension eased, and before I knew it, a smile naturally appeared on my face. "My name's Chris, by the way. We're rivals today, but nice to meet you." "What's your name?" "I'm Sean." "Good to meet you, Sean. But it's a bit complicated, isn't it? We're competing for the same spot now." "Still, I don't like the idea of being all tense and awkward." I tried talking to some of the others, but they didn't seem too interested. "Really? Well, I'm glad you spoke to me. It definitely helps ease my nerves. It's better to talk to someone than walk into the interview feeling anxious." "Ah, I like you. You've got the right mindset." After the interview, let's grab a bite to eat, win or lose. No hard feelings either way. "Yeah, sounds good." Chris had a friendly, approachable vibe, and it seemed like he was great at building connections with people. Even from our brief conversation, I could tell he was a good guy. He'd definitely be well suited for a sales job. As we chatted, I noticed some of the other candidates whispering and watching us. It's pointless to pretend we're getting along. I could hear a voice saying that. "Well, I'm going to practice a bit more for the interview. Let's both give it our best shot." "Yeah, let's do our best, Chris." Before I knew it, it was time for the interview. "My name is Robert, and I'll be conducting today's interview. We'll be interviewing in the next room. While there will be other interviewers present, I'll be the main one asking the questions. I'll call 2 names at a time, so when you're called, please follow me into the room. With that, he called the first 2 names. I anxiously wait for my turn, wondering when my name will be called. There are about 10 people. Only 3 will pass. It's not an impossible hurdle, but looking around at the capable people, I start to feel a bit discouraged. That's when I catch a glimpse of my dad's watch. That's right. Just give it your all. I've made it this far, there's no need to hold back. I'm going to say what I need to say and do what I came here to do. Dad's watching over me. Mom is probably cheering me on too. I'll do my best. I gently stroke the watch as I mutter to myself. And then, another group is called. After that, the next group is called, and finally, it's my turn. Sean and Chris. Please come to this room next. Yes. I didn't expect us to be paired up. But I'm not going to hold back just because we're rivals. Yes. Let's do our best. There's something a bit awkward about doing an interview with someone I know. But there's no time to dwell on that. This is a rare opportunity. I've got to give it my all. The 2 of us walk into the room and sit down. Now then, please introduce yourselves, including your education and a self-promotion. Yes. Chris confidently delivers his self-promotion. As expected, he's a great speaker. With a friendly smile, he emphasizes his strengths. Listening to him, I try to boost my own confidence. I've got to follow Chris's lead. If I speak without confidence after such a strong introduction, I'll completely fade into the background. I deliver my self-promotion with full confidence. I feel like Chris, sitting next to me, is even smiling with a sense of satisfaction. Once my self-promotion is done, I notice something. One of the interviewers is staring at me intently. Even when I'm not talking, he's quietly watching me. Is this suit not fitting me right? I keep these thoughts to myself as the interview continues. There were some unexpected questions, but I managed to answer them all without any problems. Chris did the same. Listening to Chris's responses made me even more determined not to lose to him. Because of that, I think this was the best interview I've ever done. As we near the end of the interview, the man who had been quietly observing me finally speaks. May I ask a question as well? Matthew? Of course, I don't mind. It seemed rare for the man called Matthew to speak, as the interviewer who had been asking questions so far showed a look of confusion. I tense up, wondering what kind of question is coming. I apologize for asking something unrelated, but where did you get that suit and watch? Did you buy them at a second-hand store? Ha! The sudden question leaves my mind completely blank. Is he implying they look old and worn out? Thinking he's questioning why I'm wearing something so old, I quickly respond. No. I didn't buy them at a second-hand store. They're things my late father left for me. That's why I'm wearing them today as a sort of good luck charm. Is there something wrong with that? So your father has passed away? Yes, he passed away last year due to illness. I remembered how he told me when he was alive that I should wear this suit to interviews. So I decided to wear it today. He said if I wore this suit, he would be watching over me. I see. So why do you want to work for this company? There are plenty of similar companies out there. Why did you choose ours? Please tell me. Yes, it's true there are many sales positions available. but I've admired your company for a long time. And that's because of my late father's influence. When he was alive, he would praise your company over and over again. He would always tell me how your company grew from something small into what it is today, explaining its history again and again, so much so that I got tired of hearing it. So when I saw the job posting, I knew I had to apply. I see. Did you love your father? Yes. I'm proud of him. As I said that, the interviewer covered his eyes with his hand. Then he let out a deep sigh. Is something wrong, Matthew? I had a feeling about that watch. Ha! Actually, I also have a son I had a falling out with, and we haven't spoken since. I've always hoped he's doing well somewhere. So, could I have a moment of your time after this? Sean King? Yes, of course. At that moment, the name of the company's president came to mind. Matthew King. Could this interviewer actually be Mr. King? There were no public photos of him. So, I hadn't realized it was him until I heard his name. And we share the same last name. King isn't all that common, but I didn't think much of it until now. After the final question, our interview wrapped up without any issues. To my surprise, I noticed Chris beside me sniffling, trying to hold back tears as he answered the last question. Hey! Why are you crying? You surprised me when you started tearing up during the interview. Your dad, he was a great guy, huh? I didn't realize that suit and watch had such a special meaning. I'm weak when it comes to stories like that. Chris's eyes were red, and he was still sniffling. Seeing him like that, I couldn't help but laugh. I've never seen anyone cry during an interview. Ha ha. Well, you're the one who started telling that touching story. Everything was going smoothly until then, but after hearing your story, I couldn't think straight. It just shows you're a good person. Oh, sorry, I slipped into casual speech. It's fine, don't worry. Not long after that, all the interviews were finished, and we were dismissed. I was the only one called back by Matthew, while Chris waited for me at a cafe nearby. Left alone in the room with him, Matthew gave me a serious look. Was your father Ryan King? Yes, that's right. I'm sorry for asking that odd question during the interview. But when I saw that suit and watch, I couldn't help myself. So, Ryan is gone now? Yes, he passed away last year due to illness. And what about your mother? Does she live with you? My mother passed away when I was young, also due to illness. I see. Let me tell you a bit about your father. But first, did your father ever mention his parents, your grandparents? He told me they passed away when I was little. I see. You might find this hard to believe, but I'm your grandfather. Ryan and I worked together for a while. It was here, at this company. This company has been passed down from my father, and I planned to hand it over to Ryan, but then he brought a woman to me, saying he wanted to marry her. Your mother. Being told he was my grandfather didn't surprise me much. I had a feeling it was possible, even during the interview. Plus, he resembled my father in a way, which made it easier to believe. Why didn't you approve? I had plans for his future. I wanted him to marry someone else, a match I had arranged. It wasn't something he asked for, it was all my doing. I thought it would be best for him. But when he brought home this unknown woman and said, I want to marry her, I just couldn't accept it. I also thought it would damage my reputation. Of course, it was my fault for never asking Ryan how he felt. But at the time, I truly believed what I was doing was for his happiness. Matthew squinted his eyes as he talked about the old days. He had a somewhat lonely expression on his face. The woman he wanted to marry was physically weak, and I heard she was pregnant. I was furious that he had gotten someone else pregnant when I had already found him a suitable partner. In my anger, I kicked him out of the house. We never spoke again after that. At first, I thought we'd still see each other at work, but shortly after I kicked him out, Ryan quit the company. Neither of us ever reached out to the other again. I just assumed he was living well somewhere. I see. So you really are I'm your grandfather. Although to call myself that feels undeserving, since I've never done anything for you. I had no idea my father lived through all of that. But does that mean my father betrayed the woman he was supposed to marry? At the time, I thought so too. But apparently, he had been honest with her from the start. He told her he wasn't planning to marry her and that he was in love with someone else. It seemed she didn't take it too seriously and wasn't overly concerned. I see. I was overwhelmed by everything I had just learned, struggling to process it all. My grandfather is alive? My dad could have become the president of this company? He ran away with my mom? My father was always smiling, and I never knew what he was thinking. I never imagined he was hiding such a secret. And about this suit and watch. That suit was something Ryan bought with his first paycheck. We went shopping together, and he tried on all sorts of suits, rejecting each one until he finally chose that one. It took over 3 days to decide. Ryan was so stubborn. And that watch? I gave it to him as a gift when he got his first job. I wanted him to have something nice for his new career. So I gave him a watch with his name engraved on it. There's no mistaking it, that suit and watch were very special to him. Matthew spoke with tears welling up in his eyes. I could tell he deeply regretted the fight that had led to my dad being kicked out of the house. I never realized my father was as stubborn as my grandfather described. If only one of them had reached out first, they could have reconciled so easily. If you don't mind, would you like to come by and offer incense sometime? I think my parents would be happy. Is that really okay? After being such a bad father and grandfather, what would Ryan have thought of me? I don't know exactly how my father felt, but whenever he talked about this company, he seemed genuinely happy. He would proudly tell stories about it, saying that one day, if I ever got a job here, he'd brag to everyone about it. I believe both the company and you were important to him. I see. Matthew wiped his eyes and his shoulders shook slightly. Thank you for sharing that with me today. Please allow me to pay my respects to your parents soon. Of course. I left the room and headed to the cafe where Chris was waiting for me. So much had happened today. The interview at the company I admired. My father's hidden past. And discovering my grandfather was still alive. You're late. What were you talking about in there? Well, actually, when I told Chris the story, he started bawling even more than he did during the interview. Seeing his tear-streaked face, I couldn't help but laugh. Before I knew it, a tear slipped from my own eye as well. And a few days later, I received a call offering me the job at my dream company. I was so happy, it didn't even feel real. Then, a few days after that, my grandfather came to visit my house. The two of us offered incense and prayed together. Did they look happy? Your parents? Yes. They were always joking around, and I think we were a family filled with smiles. I see. And, actually, there's something I wanted to give you. I handed him a letter. After the interview, I was going through my father's belongings. I hadn't noticed it before, but I found these letters. One was addressed to me. And the other. I think it's for you. I haven't read them yet. While sorting through his things, I had found 2 letters. One was addressed to me, Sean. The other was addressed to his father. Matthew's eyes widened as he carefully took the letter. Do you mind if I read it now? No, I don't. Together, we began to read the letters. I didn't have the courage to read the letter alone. So, when Matthew came to visit, I thought it would be best to read it together. Here's what was written in my letter. Actually, you have a grandfather. Sorry for lying and saying he passed away. And here's something even more surprising. He's the president of that big company you admire. I had a big fight with my dad and stormed out of the house. I haven't contacted him since then, but if you ever find yourself in trouble, reach out to him. I'm sure he'll help you. If you're reading this letter, it probably means my illness wasn't cured. Well, it can't be helped. I'll be meeting your mom in the afterlife. But I'm worried about you. You're responsible and have a strong sense of justice. But that might make you spin your wheels sometimes. If you ever find yourself in a tough spot, rely on your grandpa. I'm sure he'll help you. If he doesn't, sorry. But I think it'll be okay. He's a serious and kind man, and I doubt he could ignore you if you needed help. If it looks like he might, just cry in front of him. He's weak to tears, and I bet he'll give in right away. Ha ha. I love you, my one and only son. Sean. Love you? Man, you really had to say something that cringy at the end. As I finished reading the letter, tears started falling from my eyes. When I looked over, I saw that Matthew was crying as well. What did your letter say? It said he forgives me. He also wrote that he should have apologized sooner. But in exchange for his forgiveness, he asked me to take care of you. His son, Sean. He even threatened that if I didn't, he wouldn't forgive me in the afterlife and would make me pay when we meet again. With a warning like that, I'll have to make sure I look after you properly. That sounds just like him. Yeah, that's definitely him. We talked a lot about my dad. About what he was like before I was born. And about what he was like after I came into the world. I heard stories about my dad's childhood that I'd never known. And I shared stories from his life as a father that Matthew hadn't heard. We had such a great time talking, and before we knew it, the hours had flown by. It's already this late? Looks like I stayed too long. I'm sorry. Would it be alright if I came by again to offer incense? Of course. You're welcome anytime. Matthew stood up, gathered his things, and made his way to the door. Before leaving, he turned back and bowed deeply. It seems you'll be joining our company soon. I'm counting on you. But let me be clear, your hiring had nothing to do with you being my grandson. I hired you because I believe in Sean, the man. I'll be cheering for you from the sidelines. Thank you. I'll do my best. Could it be that I was hired just because I'm his grandson? I found myself thinking that way. But he made it clear that wasn't the case. He recognized me as an individual. That made me so happy. So, after joining the company, I threw myself into the work with everything I had. There was just one surprise. Hey, so you passed too, huh? Looking forward to working with you as a fellow new hire. Chris, you made it too? I'm looking forward to it. I gained a slightly tear-prone, but great, friend. It turned out that Chris had passed the interview as well, and we ended up working together. The job was tough, and there was a lot to learn, but I'm determined to keep giving my all at this company. Since that day, I've been meeting with my grandfather occasionally. Calling him Grandpa still feels a little awkward, but maybe one day I'll get used to it. Whenever we meet, we always talk about my dad and mom. As if trying to make up for all the time that was lost, Matthew listens eagerly to my stories. I used to think I was all alone after my parents passed away, but now I realize that's not the case. I'm going to cherish both my grandfather and the company he's protected for so long. I don't have the speech script on hand. President Johnson can't deliver a speech without a script. In an unexpected situation, I quickly turned the wheel and pulled into the parking lot of a convenience store I spotted. Keith? Ignoring President Johnson's panicked voice, I grabbed my laptop and USB drive from the dashboard. I'll write the script right here. Both President Johnson and his secretary, Sherry, widened their eyes in surprise at my words. My name is Keith. I'm 32 years old. And today, I'm debuting as the personal driver for an executive. It's been a few days since my department transfer. I've been thoroughly drilled in manners and driving skills. I was also warned that some of the executives can be difficult to deal with. I was confident in my driving, but I got scolded left and right for being too rough. It was really tough. Starting, stopping, turning corners, every move had to be smooth and flawless, and it took a lot of mental effort. Recently, I've finally managed to do it naturally, and today is the big day, my debut. And the first person I'm driving is none other than President Johnson himself. I was so nervous that I stood at attention, waiting for him a full 10 minutes in advance. Then, near the automatic doors, I spotted a familiar group of people, and in a panic, I rushed back to the car, sat in the driver's seat, and lowered my head. Without noticing me, they casually walked away. I slowly got out of the car and watched their backs. I'm so jealous. The words slipped out. Those people who just passed by were my former colleagues from the sales planning department. I was working hard in that same department until recently. I used to have heated discussions with my colleagues, working tirelessly for the company and our clients. But there were quite a few people who weren't happy with my methods. After some investigation and deliberation, I was transferred to become the executive driver. To me, it felt like a demotion. I was down for a few days. I thought working in sales planning was my calling, and every day had been fulfilling. I believed I was the one contributing to the company. But in the end, they decided I wasn't needed in that department anymore. I was really down, wondering what I did wrong. But, at my core, I'm a positive person. Once you hit rock bottom, the only way is up. Above all, over the past few days, learning about driving techniques and manners has been really fun and meaningful. I've gained skills that will benefit me for the rest of my life. I started to feel grateful just for that small stroke of luck. As I was lost in thought, the automatic doors opened, and the person I had been waiting for appeared. I bent at a 90-degree angle and greeted him. Starting today, I'll be serving as your driver. My name is Keith. I'm sure there will be things I'm not perfect at, but I look forward to working with you. When I introduced myself to President Johnson, he chuckled softly. There's no need to be so tense. I'm counting on you. His friendly tone eased my nerves a little. To me, President Johnson is someone way up in the clouds. He started his company when he was young, rapidly expanded it, and now owns a 20-story office building, conducting business with numerous companies both domestically and internationally. And yet, he's still only 55 years old. It's truly impressive. Of course, I'd never spoken to him before, and the only time I'd seen him in person was during the New Year's greetings. At that time, he stood on stage with an air of authority, delivering a smooth and impressive speech. In short, he's just incredibly cool. When I relaxed a little and lifted my head, the woman who had followed behind President Johnson suddenly let out a small oops and dropped the bags she was holding all over the place. "Oh no. I'm so sorry. I'll pick them up right away." She quickly crouched down, flustered, trying to gather the scattered items. I joined in to help. "Oh, no, it's fine. I can do it myself." She tried to refuse, but I felt awkward just standing around without helping. "No, I'm just a humble driver. I'll assist in whatever way I can." I smiled slightly as I said this, and the woman's face turned red. Then, President Johnson's laughter rang out from above. "Wow, this is quite a rare sight." The woman, who I later learned was named Sherry, blushed deeply and looked down in embarrassment. I handed her the items I'd picked up, then opened the backseat door. President Johnson bowed slightly and got into the car. Sherry, following suit, also bowed and said, "Excuse me," as she got in only to bump her forehead hard against the doorframe. This time, she didn't drop anything, but the pained expression on her face said it all. President Johnson looked surprised. "What's going on, Sherry?" "Ah, Keith, this is Sherry. She's my secretary." Normally, she's very calm and competent. She's not usually like this. I swear. I nodded silently. If President Johnson says so, then she must be that kind of person. But based on my first impression, I couldn't help but think she was a bit clumsy. I pulled myself together, got into the driver's seat, and said, "We'll be leaving now. If you need anything, please don't hesitate to let me know." Before starting the car, I glanced briefly in the rearview mirror. There, I saw Sherry lightly rubbing her forehead. Indeed, when she's sitting quietly, she looks like a cool beauty. Her straight black hair is neatly styled, and her makeup is well done. She gives off an air of professionalism, though not too harsh, more like someone who takes care with her work appearance. With her sharp features and tightly pressed lips, she seems to project a reserved, distant aura. After a while, President Johnson and Sherry started talking. It seemed like they were discussing the schedule going forward. The way they talked was efficient and brisk, a complete change from her earlier clumsiness. She's got quite a strong contrast in her personality. I thought to myself as I continued driving. The next few days went by in a blur. I drove all kinds of people to various places. Some of the executives would sit in silence, while others would ask me a bunch of personal questions. But President Johnson was by far the friendliest and easiest to talk to. Every now and then, he'd bring me into the conversation. I would often respond enthusiastically, sometimes talking too much and making both President Johnson and Sherry smile wryly. Back in the sales planning department, I used to have plenty of opportunities to exchange ideas with people. So I'd been starved for that kind of interaction. When asked for my opinion, I can't help but speak up. However, President Johnson always listens intently and says, "That's an interesting perspective." I enjoyed the back and forth with him, but I secretly looked forward to seeing Sherry as well. Although Sherry had been a bit clumsy on the first day, there were no further mishaps after that, and as President Johnson had said, She proved to be a quiet, efficient secretary. When speaking with President Johnson, she was calm, almost businesslike, always sitting upright without losing her posture, even in the car. But occasionally, when our eyes met in the rearview mirror, I couldn't help but find her incredibly cute. When the three of us were casually chatting, that formal air would disappear, and she would laugh freely. "The way you drive is so smooth. It's really relaxing." When she said that, I felt like I was on cloud nine. Whenever there was a scheduled trip with President Johnson, my heart would leap. I started to feel like something special was developing between Sherry and me. A few months passed. By now, I was fully accustomed to my role as a driver. But today, there was a sense of tension in the air. It was the day of a company-hosted party. The event was also a showcase for a new system and product aimed primarily at international clients, with many overseas guests expected to attend. President Johnson was supposed to deliver a speech in English. It was such an important event that interpreters were even arranged for key domestic partners. Of course, as the driver, I wouldn't be attending, but I heard that some of the top members from the sales planning department were invited. Hearing that made me feel a little down. I wanted to be there, to talk with all the different guests. As I waited for President Johnson and Sherry, holding those thoughts, a soft voice interrupted me. "Thank you for taking care of us today." I turned to see Sherry standing there, her cheeks slightly flushed, dressed in a navy blue dress. Sherry usually wears dark color, well-tailored suits. So seeing her in a dress was a surprise. My heart skipped a beat. I'm not used to wearing this. "Does it look strange?" she asked shyly, which only made her look even cuter. I tried to keep my composure as I responded. "You look wonderful." When I smiled and said that, she gave a light, soft smile just before she stumbled. I quickly caught her. For a moment, our faces were close, and then I realized what was happening. "Oh, sorry." She immediately pulled away, her face flushed to her ears. No, I'm just glad you didn't get hurt." I stammered a bit as I spoke, while she stared at her feet. "I don't usually wear heels this high." "I'm not used to it." Indeed, she usually wears lower heels. As I was thinking about how difficult it must be for women, President Johnson appeared with a smile. Now, no flirting. Let's get going." At his sudden playful comment, both Sherry and I turned beet red. I started the car and headed for the venue. We had left early enough that we were on track to arrive with plenty of time to spare. Well then, I suppose I should practice the speech one more time. "Sherry, can you get the script?" President Johnson's relaxed voice was interrupted by Sherry's sharp, panicked tone. "Sorry?" For some reason, that sound made my heart race. "I mean, the script. I want to go over it again." President Johnson extended his hand towards Sherry. "You don't have it, President Johnson." Her voice trembled. "What? I thought you had it." I quickly intervened. "Should we turn back?" It seemed like President Johnson had forgotten the script at the office. Both he and Sherry had assumed the other had it and left without confirming. "No, we don't have time." President Johnson glanced at his watch, biting his lip. "Then maybe someone at the office could bring it to us?" I suggested, but through the rearview mirror, I saw Sherry shaking her head. "No, that won't work. All the employees attending today are heading straight from their homes." The atmosphere was getting tense, so I tried to sound as upbeat as possible. "But President Johnson, you could give an impromptu speech and..." I stopped myself. Through the rearview mirror, I could see President Johnson with his head in his hands. It's embarrassing to say, but I'm terrible at speeches. Without the script, I can't even find the words in Japanese, let alone in English. I widened my eyes in surprise at this unexpected weakness. Whenever I'd seen President Johnson give speeches, he'd always been so smooth and composed. It never seemed like he was just reading a script. I quickly swerved the car into the parking lot of a convenience store I spotted. "Keith?" Ignoring President Johnson's startled voice, I grabbed my laptop and USB drive from the dashboard. I usually used them during spare time for research or practice discussions to keep my skills sharp. "We'll reach the venue in 15 minutes. Even accounting for traffic, we've got 20 minutes to spare. I'll write the speech here, and we can print it at the convenience store. We'll make it in time." Both President Johnson and Sherry looked at me, surprised. There's no way, writing the speech in 20 minutes? And besides, the speech is in English. The Japanese guests will have simultaneous interpretation. But the main audience is international. Sherry started to protest, but I cut her off, looking at both her and President Johnson. "Sherry, do you remember even a little of the content? And President Johnson, you said you were practicing earlier, right? If you can recall any part of it, just tell me." Sherry, visibly frustrated, shot back. "It's impossible. Even with President Johnson's fluency in English, you can't write a full speech in 20 minutes. Her words irritated me. "We don't have time. Just tell me what you remember." Sherry fell silent, swallowing her next words. President Johnson, in a calm tone, began recounting the key points of the speech. I typed furiously as he spoke. "Oh, then how about continuing with this part after that?" I suggested, and President Johnson smiled in agreement. Sherry, a bit hesitant at first, gradually joined in. "Oh, right, I think it was supposed to follow with this." "I see. In that case, let's move the selling point to the other section for a stronger impact." As I spoke, I kept typing rapidly into my laptop. It felt nostalgic. The tension of the situation. It reminded me of my college days, writing papers against tight deadlines. Wow, being a Harvard graduate really pays off. President Johnson's words made me chuckle, while Sherry's eyes widened in surprise. "Wait. Harvard? Keith, were you really at Harvard back then?" I furrowed my brows, still focused on the laptop. "Back then." What did she mean by that? Though the question puzzled me, there wasn't time to dwell on it. Let's save that story for later. Right now, we need to focus. I could sense Sherry flinch a little at my abrupt tone. When I looked up suddenly, I saw her eyes filled with tears as she quietly said, "I'm sorry." So, I smiled. "Please, make sure to tell me later. I won't be able to sleep at night if you don't." Sherry pressed her temples with both hands, perhaps to keep the tears from falling, and gave me a slight nod. 15 minutes later, I transferred the completed speech onto a USB drive and printed 3 copies at the convenience store. Since I typed it so quickly, there might be a few typos here and there. After a quick check, I started the car again. A few minutes later, both President Johnson and Sherry said, "It's perfect," and I felt a bit tickled by their praise. "Keith, this is amazing. It's even more moving than the one I wrote." "I'm a little jealous," Sherry said. I laughed. The foundation was great. We built on it together, so of course it turned out even better. President Johnson smiled at my words. "You did most of the building, Keith." That praise felt genuinely rewarding. We managed to arrive at the venue safely, a little ahead of schedule. I silently appreciated the fact that the roads weren't congested. I bowed deeply to President Johnson and Sherry, saying, "Please enjoy the party. I'll be waiting here for your return." To my surprise, President Johnson handed me a paper bag. When I hesitantly accepted it, he gave me a grin. "It's your suit. Change into it and join the party." I opened my eyes wide in shock. Not as a member of the sales planning department or as a driver. "I want you by my side, as my right-hand man." My mind was racing. What? What do you mean by that? As I stammered, President Johnson clapped me on the shoulder. "I've been watching you for a while. You might have stood out a bit too much in the sales department. But our conversations in the car were extremely valuable to me, and the speech you wrote was exceptional. I want you to support me, starting today." I still couldn't quite grasp what was happening. But I'm only 32. In my flustered state, I forgot to show proper respect. President Johnson laughed. "I was 28 when I started this company." With that, he turned on his heel. "Well, if you're not interested, feel free to wait in the car." Panicking, I called after him, No. I'll come. Please let me join you." President Johnson raised his hand with a laugh and walked off. I rushed to the restroom, changed out of my driver's uniform, and into the suit. Even at a glance, I could tell it was a top-quality, tailored piece. He had prepared this for me in advance. He'd planned to give me this opportunity. The thought moved me so much that I nearly shed tears. The party ended in great success. Especially during President Johnson's English speech, the applause was thunderous. It seemed that President Johnson made it clear to everyone at the venue exactly how our company plans to expand its business and the purpose behind it. Throughout the entire party, I followed President Johnson, talking to various people and making valuable connections. It was a deeply fulfilling and meaningful experience. After the party, I was supposed to change back into my driver's uniform and drive President Johnson and Sherry home. However, President Johnson said, "I'll be dragged to the second and third parties. Take Sherry home for me. No need to change back." I wanted to accompany him to those after parties, but my job was still to drive, and getting Sherry home was my responsibility. Grateful for President Johnson's permission to stay in my suit, I started the car. "Shall I take you to the office?" President Johnson said I could take you home if you'd prefer, I asked Sherry. She hesitated for a moment before giving me her address, saying, "It's a bit far, but would that be all right?" It seemed like it would take about 40 minutes from here, but it wasn't that far. As I drove leisurely, I decided to ask something that had been on my mind. "So, since we have some time, could you tell me more about what you mentioned earlier?" At my words, Sherry flinched slightly, her shoulders trembling. "The thing from earlier." "Oh, right. You're talking about when I said, 'Did you attend Harvard back then?'" I nodded. "Actually, when I was on a tour trip to the US, you helped me out once, Keith." When she said that, memories of my time living in the US came flooding back. During some free time on the tour, I wandered off by myself, exploring different places, and ended up, somehow, in a back alley. That's when two American guys approached her. Back then, Sherry couldn't speak English fluently, so she was bewildered by their rapid speech, her eyes darting nervously. Apparently, I was the one who intervened and stopped those two men. Wait. I kind of remember helping a Japanese girl, but I don't quite recall the details. I think she was small, looked nervous. and kind of had a soft, gentle vibe. As I hesitated, Sherry let out a soft laugh. At a red light, she handed me a photo. Wasn't this the girl? Looking at the picture, I nodded firmly. A soft, flowing dress, and similarly soft, wavy hair. She was petite, nervous, and so cute that if someone had spoken to her forcefully, she'd likely nod and agree without hesitation. That was me. As she said that, I stared at the photo. Of course, since Sherry handed it to me, I knew it must be her in the picture. But I thought, though I expected it, she looked completely different from now. Sherry giggled quietly. Actually, that's the real me. I love soft, cute things, and I'm a bit clumsy too. Her cheeks flushed as she said that, making her look even more adorable. When I joined the company and got assigned to the secretary department, I went through some really strict training, and this is how I ended up. Even though she said like this, today Sherry was wearing a party dress, her hair tied neatly to the side with a hair accessory. Her usual look was a business suit, with her hair tightly pulled back into a ponytail with just a plain black tie. That must be the version of her shaped by her secretary department training. But we really parted ways right after that, didn't we? Even when I offered to walk you back since it seemed dangerous, you shook your head. Since you said you were with a tour, I figured if I just showed you to the main street, it'd be safe enough, so we parted there. But how did you remember me? I recall thinking at the time that maybe I should have escorted her back to the tour guide, and I regretted being so careless. So the event stuck with me. Blushing bright red, Sherry handed me another photo as we stopped at the next red light. What? I was utterly shocked when I looked at the picture. It was a photo of me browsing through some items at a street stall. Sherry shrank a bit, her face flushed red with embarrassment. I'm sorry, but you looked so cool that after we parted, I kind of secretly took this photo. She explained that she had kept it like a lucky charm ever since. It wasn't like I was desperate to see you again. Oh. I mean, I did want to see you again, but it was more like, you know how people carry around pictures of their favorite idols? It was kind of like that. Do you get it? Honestly, I didn't get it at all. I mean, maybe in her anxious state in a foreign country she exaggerated her memory of me, but there was no way I, with my plain looks, could ever be idol material. The person I had been staring at in that photo suddenly showed up as my driver. I got so nervous and flustered that I probably showed you nothing but embarrassing sides of me the whole day. As she said this, I remembered the day we met. Now that I think about it, her face did seem a bit flushed back then. Knowing she had all this going on behind the scenes, I felt a sudden rush of affection for her. And today, you finished that amazing manuscript in no time. When I heard you hone those skills at Harvard, I thought you were really incredible. Like you're completely out of my league. I panicked. Wait, what? You're just idealizing me again. I'm just some guy who got demoted from the planning department and ended up as a driver, you know? But Sherry gently shook her head in response. No. It's just that you were too talented for our planning and sales department to handle. Even through the rearview mirror, her serious gaze made my heart race. There was a time when President Johnson looked confused. He said, I think he's a real asset, but we're not sure how to utilize him. When he asked what to do, I suggested, why don't you keep him close? And then, with a smile I'd never seen from him before, he said, you're right. He was talking about you. Though he said you're right, nothing seemed to change around President Johnson. The only real difference was that I had been reassigned as his driver. I had been a bit suspicious about that. I think he moved you to the driver position because it gave you more opportunities to talk to him. President Johnson seemed so lively whenever you two were in the car together. Hearing that, I felt a warmth spread through my chest. And seeing you standing next to President Johnson at the party tonight, you looked so cool. I know it might be presumptuous of me, but I want to stand next to you too, Keith. My heart pounded. I kept telling myself not to get the wrong idea. I mean, I'd love to believe that, but isn't it just that you're idealizing me because I helped you out when you were scared in a foreign country? I mumbled my thoughts awkwardly. There was silence, and when I nervously glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw Sherry quietly shedding tears. Panicking, I pulled into a nearby parking lot. I didn't care how much the parking fee would be. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you cry. It's just, I'm insecure. I mean, I don't have enough confidence to believe someone as beautiful as you could really like me. I'm afraid you'd just realize it was a mistake and dump me. I reached back and handed her a handkerchief. But instead of taking it, Sherry grabbed my hand firmly. What? When I looked at her, confused, she pressed the handkerchief to her lips and whispered, in a tearful voice, "Then, why don't you test me? Test whether I'm really the kind of woman who'd just dismiss this as a mistake. Date me, and find out." For a moment, the thought crossed my mind that if it was a mistake, I'd end up heartbroken. But I decided to stop overthinking it. If you're okay with someone like me, I'd be happy to, I muttered softly, and Sherry burst out laughing. You graduated from Harvard, President Johnson trusts you, you have so many amazing qualities, and yet you have no confidence? That's strange. I was confident in my work and my principles, but when it came to my looks, I'd never been secure. Especially when it came to relationships. Still, I had a feeling that this might be my last love. And years later, that feeling proved to be right. Sherry and I got married, and now we live in the United States. After several years working as President Johnson's right-hand man, I was appointed president of the company he expanded overseas. Our kids, who are now in elementary school, came along with us. They cried about leaving their friends in Japan, but once we arrived, they managed to make new friends, chatting and playing with their imperfect English. I also lived in the US when I was a kid because of my parents' work. That's when I first dreamed of going to Harvard. As I watched the kids play, I shared my thoughts, and Sherry's eyes widened in surprise. Oh my! What if our kids end up wanting to go to Harvard too? I chuckled. No matter what dreams they have, I'd like to help them make it happen. At that, Sherry smiled warmly. You're right, sometimes dreams can come true if you don't give up. She winked playfully at me. I gave a small smile and took her hand in mine. Our meeting again, it was fate, wasn't it? With that, I gently kissed her forehead. I looked over at our kids playing in the living room. I wondered what kinds of dreams they'd have, and how they'd achieve them. Sherry and I still had plenty of dreams of our own, and we were just getting started. How many more dreams can we fulfill in this lifetime? Thinking about that, I tightly held Sherry's hand.